Okay, class, so today we're going to be discussing saturation. What does it mean? How to use it? I'm going to go through some plugins to explain saturation and how I use it. And then, if we have enough time, run it through some analog gear. So let's start with what is saturation for you guys? What is your understanding of saturation?
Um, it happens basically when oh god, I don't even know where to start. Okay, there's someone else go.
Somebody want to take over?
It's like distortion.
Distortion is part of saturation. Distortion is you taking saturation to an extreme where the waveform starts possibly clipping in
Okay,
analog world.
I'm gonna throw a bunch of spaghetti at a wall. So if you have frequencies and then you cut them off at a certain point, you then create more frequencies, which are harmonics. And so that act of cutting the wave off before it can fully reach its peak creates creates clipping, which then create and this. But when you don't cut it off fully, like super, I keep doing this, where you don't cut it off like super hard, and you create soft clipping, which is then makes more like saturation, which is more like subtle kind of. Which adds more like second order harmonics against spaghetti at a wall. Second order harmonics, which is like okay, yeah, I'm gonna stop.
All right. So I see the direction you're going. Um, I do want to establish a difference that clipping can add clipping does cause distortion. Clipping can cause um, a change in the shape and the harmonic order of an instrument because of the destruction of the digital audio, right? But saturation starts way before that. Saturation is any piece of analog equipment that you run audio through will introduce some amount of saturation. And it is measured as THD, total harmonic distortion. And you'll see it as a percentage many times. And let's go through that. It's total harmonic distortion, not total clipping distortion. So if we go back to the EQ class where posted that video for you guys of here's the harmonic sequence. You have this third harmonic, fourth harmonic, fifth harmonic. That is what it's involved with saturation. If you have 1K and you run that instrument through, if you have 1K and you run that 1K tone through a piece of equipment, and suddenly when you analyze it on an FFT graph, you see that 2K pops up and 4K pops up, that is saturation that equipment is adding. That is total harmonic distortion that equipment is adding. And how it adds the harmonics, where it adds it, meaning if it's the second harmonic or if it's the third and the fifth harmonic, whatever that sequence is and how it brings it up is where we categorize it as again a second or third or harmonic saturation. Without getting too much into this, what it is basically to a certain degree, and how I like to think about it is you are adding EQ frequencies. You're suddenly adding a whole bunch of narrow notch, a whole bunch of narrow band peaks. And as you push the saturation up, these little harmonics go up also at the same time. So now 1K sounds different because 1K now sounds 1K, 2K, 4K, and something else. Go.
Um, with a percent total harmonic distortion, does that in that number, does it refer to specifically whether that piece of equipment is adding second or third order harmonics, or is it just like any harmonics?
It's any harmonics. That's why it's total. So any harmonic distortion um, is what it adds, and you use that, and you can look up equipment that is just used to say how much it's altering the sound, and it'll tell you at this many decibels of level is when the saturation starts. For example, when you're trying to determine the headroom of a piece of equipment, you use one of the things that you figure out is what the total harmonic distortion cutoff is. Once you've pushed equipment past a certain point where you get into 1% of total harmonic distortion, that is very, very audible. Even though it's just 1%, it's very audible. And in high end gear, you normally don't get into 1% unless you're peaking it, right? And depending on the equipment, it'll go from 1% to almost 100% pretty quickly because you're pushing that equipment to its extreme. Let me pull this up. Good. Let me switch that over here and just have the FFT here. And let me pull this up again. Okay. So when you're measuring equipment, you'll get the level. You keep cranking the level through the equipment, and let's say you're sending 1K, and then as soon as you start seeing these other peaks pop up, you're like, oh, okay, it's now it's at 0.01 total harmonic, 0.5, 1, and then you know that when you're at 1, it's so audible that you might just establish, here is the maximum of what you might consider clean signal. Anything above that is just sheer saturation, and then you keep going until you actually hear and see the signal clip in the audio world, meaning you've maxed out the capacity and headroom of that analog equipment. And then you'll see a measurement where it says, here's your max level, here's your SPL, your cutoff point. Headroom's the word I'm looking for. So for example, and I've mentioned this before in class, the summing circuitry of the API console, I can't vouch for the one that you guys have at Valencia, although it's supposedly the exact same summing circuitry. The one at Fat Planet has a plus 28 dB of headroom, meaning when you're watching the VU meter, there's 28 decibels above zero before it gets to full-on distortion. The Neve console in the Rupert Neve console 5088 has a ridiculous headroom. It can go up to plus 40 above zero before it actually craps out. So that means if you have 48 channels on the API console and they're all hitting let's say -6 or something like that, an average signal, you have a lot of headroom before it actually distorts. But you do have to keep that in mind, and the closer you get to that plus 28, the more you're going to hear the API sound. And when you look at a graph on the THC of the console, APIs tend to saturate more on the low end than the top end, versus SSLs tend to saturate more on the top end, and then it does something slightly different on the low end. That becomes the sound of the board. The 5088 practically stays clean, and it has a little more even harmonic saturation, and then you start hearing it more. I've never been able to push a 5088 so I can hear the sound as much as I hear it on the API. Now, what was the question?
So when you have the main on the API, it's called the program, but so, or like so like when you have the main stereo bus go the VU meters pushing into the red, like the 0 to 3, are you getting the API sound then, or is it at what point is it when you were smashing the needle to like where it's like at 3 the whole time, or is it only when it's in that red zone, or like
So now listen to what you're asking, and what is the highest level that a VU meter on the console gets to?
3?
+3. So where's the point of saturation that I mentioned on the API? +28.
Yeah, so
So you can't even see it on the meter unless you have something like a Duro meter, where you would have a high end analog meter that can give you up to +20. And
so,
then now you can actually see that when you're pushing it and the meter is pegged over here, then you can really hear it.
so you're not going to be hearing it unless it is at +28, or does it add it's adding saturation no matter a little bit no matter where it's at, right? And plus but +28 is like the limit, so if you go above +28 it's going to start sounding like crap.
No, +28 is the equivalent to 0 dBFS in digital. There is nothing past. That point is sheer destruction, distortion, nothing discernible. It's like the equivalent of you suddenly putting a fuzz pedal on your entire mix. It's just nothing. So every console, every circuitry has a gradient, and the closer you get to that final point, it'll react differently. People who've been using analog consoles for a long time learn where that gradient is. You learn to perceive that saturation. And when you're mixing, that's again why at the very beginning of the semester I said you have to understand gain structure. Because gain structure in Pro Tools in the box is different than gain structure on an analog console, because when you push an analog console a certain way, it changes the frequency response because it's adding color, it's adding saturation. And you get to a point where you're listening and you're feeling where it's you're hearing a lot of that saturation, and when you look at the VU meter you're like, yeah, I'm a little too much. Go to Pro Tools, select all outputs, lower it 3 or 4 dB until you hear the saturation get a little back into control. Now you're gaining back some headroom and you're not pushing it as much, and now you're back in control of where the saturation is. Sort of following? Let me see if I can get the graph to do what I want it to do. And no, I need to put that over here.
So I guess my main question is, where's the sweet spot on the API? Like, is it in the red zone, like 0 to 3?
Give me one quick second so I can get this going without having to actually hear that annoying tone the entire time. Let me route this differently. Let me just do this one more time. And this is going to mix bus. Okay. Okay, I got my routing squared off. Let me take this out. Let me go and do this. And open this one more time. Okay, where's the sweet spot? Where's the sweet spots depends what I'm mixing. If I'm mixing hip hop, urban, EDM, low end drives that console differently. It tends to lean more into low end saturation, low frequency saturation. So it's easier for me to start hearing the saturation a little quicker, level wise, in a mix that's heavy bottom. If I'm doing a jazz album, low end's not, energy is not there compared to an urban style. Some rock music might not have the same energy either, so I can push the board more. It really ends up being a feel thing that you kind of have to learn and adjust to it.
So do you regularly bury the needle?
Do I regularly bury the needle? No, not really. Not on the API. You tend to see that a little more on SSL because you're kind of wanting that upper end harmonic. If you try to bury the needle on the API, you actually start hearing your top end air get rolled off, and then you start hearing it kind of tilt, losing some extreme top end, and then this starts getting heavier and heavier. Okay, so here is a plugin called Kelvin from Tone Projects, really good company. And this allows me to add all sorts of saturation devices. So I have a pure second order harmonic, pure third order harmonic. I can add tube saturation. I can add op amp saturation. And I can add transformer saturation. All these are things that as an engineer you make decisions when you purchase equipment and you run vocals, instruments through this equipment. All these elements within that piece of gear add a color, a signature to it. Okay, so if we go to second order harmonics, you can see that here's a 1K tone. I add it and it's adding a 2K tone right there. That is what saturation is. If I go to third order harmonic, now it's adding a different multiple. It's making sense? So multiplied by 2. Multiplied by 3. There is more to this sequence though than just that, but here is the basics. Okay, so I'm cranking this at plus 40 of so I'm really forcing it to clip so you can really see that. So let's see what this company's interpretation of transformer. You see a couple of spikes up here. So how's that going to sound? This transformer is adding third order harmonics plus something else way up there. So this is going to make a vocal sound probably a little brighter because of that air band. Third order harmonics and this is real big quote between quotations here, third order harmonics tends to be associated with a brighter, edgier sounding saturation. Second order harmonics tends to be considered warmer, bassier, thicker saturation. And that's very overly simplified, but if you kind of put that in that context, that might help you. So in my summing amp on the Neve, and same thing you guys have at Valencia, there's a silk button on those channels. If you hit it, if you hit the silk button so it lights up red, you're adding third order harmonics. And go ahead and crank the silk button, and you will hear that is edgier, brighter. If you add the second order harmonics, it starts sounding, which is the blue LED, it starts sounding thicker and it's tilted in the other direction. Every manufacturer is going to have its own little signature color. And most cases, it's going to be a combination of second and third order harmonics. Okay? And again, that's part of the signature. So if we go to dark iron, whatever that is, look, just like I was saying, here is a combination of second and third order harmonics. And that's going to give you a warmer, quote unquote, sound, but still edgy because it has third order harmonics. If we go to tube that everybody says, oh, tube is warmer. Is it? Because he's using real equipment to simulate this response. This tube cranked has a very slight amount of second order harmonics, but has a ton of third order harmonics. If we go to vintage, it has a little less of third order harmonics, more second, but look at the top end, how it changes. You have another little peak there, it's barely there, and this goes up. When you go here, that harmonic shoots up, and some other ones of these go down. Okay, I'm gonna lower this a lot, and I'm gonna bring it up, and tell me when you guys are sick of hearing 1K tone, because I get sick of it pretty quickly. Okay, so let's start with second. Third. Second again. See how that sounds almost like musical, harmonic, like there's a musical interval there. That's part of that sensation of sounding warmer because harmonically it can make more sense. This sounds like, you know, your TV just crapped out and you're hearing that coming out of it. Okay? So now let's hear one transformer. The dark iron. So if you go to equipment, for example, Shadow Hills has a preamp called the Gamma. And you look at it and it has a switch and it tells you you can select between iron, nickel, and I forgot what the third one is. Iron, nickel, and I think transformless. There's a bigger version of it, I'm thinking of the 500 series. You have those three. The full rack version has a third one. I believe it's the St. Ives, which is the original Neve, something like that. So when you go to transformless, it would be the equivalent of hearing 1K tone pure. When you go to the steel or the nickel, you are now hearing these changes just like I'm hearing between the dark iron and whatever this is. And here's purple. That's what saturation is. That's what you're doing when you're running any piece of equipment. This, to a certain degree, is EQing. You guys follow train of thought there? So let's get into, we did tubes. This is an op amp. So if you get into op amps, API has a format called 2520 in their op amp, and it's a little box, and it has some legs on it, and anything that functions on a 2520 op amp tends to have sockets where those fit in. That means they're swappable, so it's easy to replace. But so many manufacturers have jumped on it and designed their own version. So now you can change those op amps and change color on the circuitry, just like I was doing now with changing those colors on the plugin. So this unit that I have here came with their version, their interpretation of an original 2520 op amp, which sounded good, sounded fine to me. But me doing my research and trying things out at Fat Planet, I found another company that I feel captures the essence of the API sound and then takes it up a notch and enhances it with better top end, better bottom end. Swap the component, and this now sounds like $1 million in comparison. Okay. I had done that already at Fat Planet, so our API console does not sound like a traditional API. And I also modded a whole other summing amp section on it, so I have 2 different summing amps on that console. Again, pursuit of this. I can send some channels to one summing amp, some channels to another summing amp, and I have 2 different harmonic saturation combinations. When I start mixing, I tend to start by picking the saturation color that I feel suits best that instrument to aid it in fitting better within that mix. Same process I started with you guys in the beginning. Let's establish a proper balanced rough mix. Let me pan it. Let me set things where I need to. And then I start changing things based on saturation tonally to unlock different potentials of these instruments, and they start moving in height wise and forward and back because of this saturation. Okay, let's ditch the signal generator. And let's listen to this vocal.
I have a quick question about harmonics.
Sure. Go for it.
So, so they're like related to like musical intervals, or it's like octaves above, right?
Remember, the harmonic scale was, if you're the first, the second harmonic is times 2. The third harmonic is times 3, so that's not an octave anymore.
Yeah, so that means that's an octave in a fifth. So so when you're doing third order harmonics, you're essentially getting like almost like a power chord sound, right?
Without the octave, because you're not seeing the first octave. You're hearing the 1 and the 5.
So if you have second and third order harmonic, then you're getting like a power chord basically. Okay.
if it helps you process it that way, cool. I know I've been doing this enough that I kind of split my brain into the musical side and the technical side. And when I'm thinking harmonics, I'm thinking color palette saturation, and I can identify some of these colors that way. And then when I am producing, I'm thinking musical notes and stuff like that. So,
It just helps me because like when I then if I go in and EQ, then I can be like, oh, it's adding third order because I can see that I a boost at F sharp, but I know that the tonic is B.
right. And then now you kind of get why it works when I tell you to EQ the bass guitar and add an octave above and the fifth above, and how just by doing a little bit of that subtly, 1 or 2 dB, suddenly made that bass pop forward and almost sound fuller because I'm playing with the harmonic signature of the bass.
So are there some situations like with the bass where you would be better off instead of using an EQ putting on some saturation?
One step back, I start with saturation. And this gets into how I start the process. It's still the same thing that I've been trying to kind of go through the whole process with you guys. The steps is still I start with a rough mix, get everything balanced, get panned, everything else. I sit down and I analyze each individual track and figure out, is there a problem? Do I need to address the problem first before I start tone shaping? So, are there tuning issues? Are there editing issues? Are there recording issues like there's some low end rumble from an AC filter, from AC having the background? Anything that I'm hearing like that's not right, I need to address that first. Then I might throw an EQ to correct that problem. I might run noise suppressors. I might run whatever I need to make that sound usable and pleasing. Then, when I'm like, okay, now let me start tonally shaping this, I'm listening to the whole thing and I'm like, this vocal sounds a little dark. So let me add something that'll pull out a little more third order harmonics. And whether that's picking a channel on my summing amp, sending it to the red side instead of the blue side, and then I listen to it, I'm like, there's some more top end. Do I need some more? I might then go to a plugin and say, let me add a little more of this saturation color, and then be like, okay, cool. Now it's sitting where I would have wanted it to. Because remember, when I try to produce stuff, I pick the microphones and the preamps and the compressors, so I get a final tone pretty damn close to what I think it should to fit the song and the genre. So since not everybody thinks that way, and most home studios have really clean preamps, really good quality converters, it sounds a little bit lifeless to me. So then I have to take extra steps to bring in some of that color from the world I tend to live in, to then, when I get that color situated correctly, and when I start EQing, doing additive EQing, I am now doing more subtle movements in EQs and adding a stretching EQing, because the saturation is doing half of the work, if not most of the work. Does that help a little better?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. This is a signal flow. This is a process that I've developed for a while, but because I started learning how to mix when I started Fat Planet on the API, and I was doing API mixing for a while, when it got to a point where I had to start doing more in the box mixes, I kept hitting walls where I couldn't get the sound how I wanted it. and I had to kind of dig into what's the issue here. The issue is color that equipment adds. Okay, so let's hear the vocal. And let me bypass here.
Years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled from all of those years. It's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying
Okay,
in
so
the
let's
evening
add second order
sun.
harmonics,
Lay
and I'm just
it
gonna
to
crank it.
rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Notice it's a subtle difference. It almost sounds like he just got like an inch closer to the microphone, so you hear a little fuller bassy mic proximity effect, right?
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole grave.
Let me add one instrument so you have something to compare against. Same thing as EQ and compression. When you're just listening to it in absence, it tends to be a little harder to hear.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Okay, so there's a difference there, but remember, this is a pure second, third order. Okay, this is very clinical. Let's get into a little more of what you might actually try to experience out there.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head.
Notice that with this one, automatically there's a little bit of a tilt to the top end, and the consonants sound crisper and a little more forward. Without it, it almost sounds like the consonants are just kind of rolled and pushed back.
Adds like a crackliness almost. It's like really pleasing.
Yes, obviously I am driving the crap out of this, but trying to exaggerate it for this class.
Feels like it's
All of those.
the bass without it.
The bass what?
The vocals feel like they're like, you know, almost competing with the bass without this saturation on it.
Absolutely. And again, this happens if you have one preamp in your studio and you're recording everything through the exact same preamp. Everything's competing against each other, and harmonically you're structuring everything on top of each other. So when I record drums, if any of you guys ever get around to getting into music production class with me, I'll record a drum set and I'm using about 6 to 8 different preamps. And the kick has one preamp, the snare has a different preamp, the toms have different preamps, the overheads have different preamps. Because I'm picking the equipment based on their analog signature, their saturation signature, to enhance what I need.
from all of those years. It's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head.
For some reason, I really like this boutique. It just kind of, it's not too bright crackly. It lifts it up from that low end. It's not a low end saturation or heavily low saturation. It just kind of nudges it the right way. Let me go back and forth again.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. From all of those years, it's all in my head.
Instantly, I don't feel like I need to EQ it anymore. You guys agree?
I think that one sounds the best by far.
Okay, so this is part of the process. The more you learn your equipment, the more you learn your plugins, the more you start attaching that signature sound, that EQ to it. So when you're listening to the mix originally, you're like, I kind of want that guitar to stick out this way. I think this plugin or this piece of equipment will get me there. And then you try it out, you adjust it. It's like, yeah, cool. Same thing that we were discussing in the EQ class. Take a wild guess. I'm hearing this. I think I need to cut 400, and then you just go for it. Don't just gently, no, just go for it and learn from the mistake of that's not how I thought it was going to respond to, or yes, that's exactly how I thought it was going to respond. Okay, this plugin's very good, and you have two stages. So now you can run it through the boutique and then run it through something else and have two different types of saturation, which, let's go through the signal chain here. If I'm recording a vocal through a tube mic, and then it's going through a preamp, those are two different pieces of equipment that are amplifying the signal, that are adding is color. Then you're adding some sort of compressor. Then when I'm mixing it through a board. I could possibly also send that instrument through another compressor or a multi-bus compressor in parallel, and that's adding another layer of saturation. So having a unit that has two stages of saturation is way closer to possibly what you might need. Okay. So let's leave the vocal there. And let's go to bass. I'm going to pull the decapitator for the bass. Anybody familiar with this unit?
I love this plugin.
Black Friday deals are already starting. They're up like crazy. The decapitator was for like half price or less, and the entire bundle of sound toys is up for grabs also. I definitely recommend to everybody in this class, get the decapitator and get the Echo Boy. Those two I use nonstop in every mix that I use, and I've been using them for over a decade. Do you guys know of plugindiscounts.com? No? Plugindiscounts.com is a reseller of plugins. You open an account with them, and then you'll have access to exclusive pricing through them, which normally tends to be a 10 to 15% discount. But on Black Friday week, you get 10% on top of whatever Black Friday price these companies are already giving you. So if you had 25% off on the Decapitator, you might have an additional 5 to 10% off on the Decapitator if you buy it through plug-in discounts. Every year it changes and stuff like that, but you can get lots of stuff. Like I've bought Melodyne upgrades for 50% off at that website, and you don't see that discount anywhere else. They're not promoting it, only through that website. So have fun with that. Okay, bass. I'm gonna start with just flat.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow.
So here I'm actually driving the signal in, and then I've compensated with the output. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these styles, which is the same thing as on the other plugin. I'm selecting the different saturation device. Okay. So I'm definitely driving this so it's clearly for you to, so you can hear it, right? And then I'm listening to this and I feel like it needs some attitude or some adjustment so I can get it to sit where I need it to sit against the drums. And let me do this. And let me... And right off the bat, you're hearing how the bass just shifts in different directions. This might not sound pleasing, but you're at least figuring out the tonal signature of A, E, N, T, and P, whatever that's supposed to mean, right? And then you start making some adjustments. So let's start with something that I just pulled up for the fun of it. So here I'm driving it still a lot. You can actually filter the signal on the low end, on the high end, and then this has a tone wheel, so you can go darker, meaning bassier, or brighter, and then you have a blend knob, and then you have a makeup gain. So I've made it like I tend to do in this class. I'm bypassing it and on and off until I kind of balance the level out. So let's kind of tweak it a little bit. So I started with a style over here, tweaked it. It was creating a definition and separation from the drums, but as soon as I added the vocal, I'm like, no. Now it's creeping up over there. So let me find somewhere else. And this A now retained more of the original bass, but still tightened it up and gave it some attitude, and then just adjusted it, and I kind of found a little middle ground. So this is kind of like, to a certain degree, EQing, but with a much wider palette, all encompassing. Okay? So now the vocals and the bass have some nice edge.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. If I
And since this is a very melodic bass player, I wanted to retain those properties. I wanted to make sure that the bass melody didn't just get drowned out by everything else. So now the drums are a little lackluster. So let's play around with this. This is Kush Audio makes his take on what an API pre-sounds, what a Neve pre-sounds, and this is the tweaker, which is the compressor you normally see over my shoulder over here. This is his own signature compressor that he based on specific circuitry from the 70s that has a tone that he really liked, and he wanted to build an entire compressor based on the sound and saturation of that circuit. So I'm gonna apply this to the cymbal bus and to the two drum buses. So we're gonna hear the drums through API, Neve, and tweaker. Here we go. I think I'm driving the Neve just a little bit more than I'm driving the other ones. Let me just make a quick adjustment. All right, so now let's listen to this in context with bass and vocals.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head.
Give me one quick second. I need to switch.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun.
API.
Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It
Weaker.
follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun.
API.
Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard,
Neve.
riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my
Weaker.
head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black.
Is that pretty clear difference when you hear it in context? Which do you guys prefer, hearing the bass and vocals? Where should it sit?
I think tweaker personally.
I liked the tweaker as well.
Why?
The snare popped more. The other two sounded muddier.
But it popped. I mean, the snare pops on the API, but it pops in
But
a
it's,
different place.
yeah,
On the API, the snare suddenly has more bite, but almost thinner because it's so much brighter. Does that sound about right?
yeah.
And I don't really think the drums need to be reaching up. Again, the vocal is not very powerful. I want to keep that air and edge mainly for the vocal. So let's hear this again.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole gray.
And not just the snare. The snare just sounds even more like a fat, tuned down snare, but the kick suddenly has this extra girth to it and punch to it, right? So now we've kind of rebalanced the whole mix with just a little saturation. If we take the vocal saturation off the decapitator and the drums,
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun.
now we're introducing a little bit of a different excitement to this track. Okay, so then you can kind of go through the different instruments and do this if you feel it's necessary, or you can process this as a bus, which I tend to kind of go either way depending. If it's something what I'm hearing that this track wasn't recorded correctly, I would have added some more tonal saturation to bring it to life and make it sit well, then I'll process that individual track. But that also means that I could have a whole guitar bus. And on that guitar bus, I might have a plugin or a piece of equipment that I add a certain tonality to it that I like. And everything that's a guitar goes through that bus. So that becomes the signature for the guitar bus and automatically locks all the guitars into a position harmonically, saturation wise, in that mix. And then I have a drum bus. The drum bus has its own color. In this case, I actually own the tweaker, and I run the drums through the tweaker, and it does what it does, and that locks it in somewhere else. Somebody was going to say something.
Yeah, would you say that putting saturation on a bus has somewhat the effect of, like, quote unquote gluing it together?
Maybe. Depends. Sorry, it's going to be my answer every time. Yes, in a sense, because saturation on equipment, once you get it to a certain point, it starts sounding like compression. Because you are, to a certain degree, starting to round out the initial sound. That 1K, you start seeing that it starts kind of getting, the transient of it starts getting rounded out by the circuitry. So it could sound gluing in a similar sense that compression on a mix bus could, quote unquote, glue it. But also how it brings out other tonalities and tightens it, enhances it, could help it lock into somewhere that it needed or bring out something else that it needed. So to a certain degree, yes, it can glue it. It can glue it because an analog device or saturation device can add compression, can add some sort of EQ, and can bring out life into that instrument that didn't exist. Okay.
From all of
let's hear what happens if I take this, and let's hear how much we can hear through the wonders of Zoom what the analog world does. Okay.
It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest.
I need to match the levels quickly so we're not fooled here.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'll turn off my mic and you're going to see me go from DAC, which means it's going out of my Lynx converter through the Dutch back into the Lynx converter, and you're hearing the result of that without any piece of equipment inserted. And then when I go to the Dutch, you're hearing the signal that's being sent to the Dutch pre-output. Everybody following? So even though this says Dutch mix, it's pre-Dutch send. The DAC is the return from the Dutch. Okay, so let's start here.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard.
Can you guys hear a difference?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot. It's most noticeable in the kick, in my opinion.
Kick and snare. The drums really come to life with everything on.
With the Dutch on?
Correct.
And mind you, this is a transparent. Are you guys hearing a saturation change, like drastically shifts like we've been doing with the plugins, or do you just hear like things are now separated and more defined?
I am tempted to say that the kick was a bit of a drastic change. There's a lot more high end attack to it, in my opinion.
Okay, and you would associate that with the similar process that we've been going through, where some sort of saturation aided into that brightness of the kick. Okay,
For sure.
Nick.
Yeah, I like the Dutch better. I felt like with the D8C, it was everything was kind of like a little muddy and kind of maybe glued together a little too much.
Okay, and then Madison.
I would agree with what Patrick said, but again, add the snare on top of that. I like the snare has a totally different tonal. It's totally tonally different from the DAC to the Dutch, and it sounds to me like there's more saturation.
Very interesting. Let's add these guitars. Let's get back to, and then Nick, just so you Just so you're aware, when it's on Dutch, it's not the analog. When it's on the DAC, it is going through the analog. Okay.
Great.
Dutch.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From
Now, what do you guys think when I add the guitars?
Guitars got a lot brighter with the saturation.
And do you hear a difference in separation, or does it still sound placement about the same?
I'd say it comes forward a bit more. Definitely separates, like you said.
Let me add one more thing over here to make sure this doesn't. That's Vox verb. Vox verb.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like
Okay. Now, try to ignore everything except the verb. Quality of the verb, tail of the verb, tonality of the verb, and what the verb is doing to the vocal.
from all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun.
All right, give me a second.
From all of those years, it's all
Let me see if I'm exceeding something here. No.
from all of those years, it's all in my head. From all of those years, it's all in my head. If from all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard.
Sorry with that back and forth, a little confusing. You guys notice any difference there with the reverb?
Can you do it again?
Okay, let me try to do it without hitting the wrong button again. I was trying to exaggerate this a little bit more. I'm gonna mute the drums.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From
How about now?
Definitely noticed it that brought the verb forward. So like whenever the vocal wasn't, whenever the the dry vocal wasn't playing, the verb came forward again, almost like it was. And I say almost, definitely not, but like almost like it was sidechained.
And do you hear like the vocal is pushed back as much when it's going through the Dutch as it was going in the box? Or do you hear a little more separation of vocal and verb?
Definitely separation, which I think is what I was trying to say, in that like whenever the vocal stops, like you can hear the verb as like a separate thing.
Anybody else want to add to that?
The vocals on the Dutch, they definitely come forward, opposed to on the DAC. It also sounds like the tail gets shorter, and I can't tell if it's the tail that actually gets shorter, and I mean it gets shorter on the Dutch. I can't tell if it gets shorter or if it's now buried because the vocals are now more in front.
Try a little bit of both.
Okay.
So what I've noticed is an increase in resolution of verb tails, where the gear is allowing more more of the tails to come through and be present than when it's just in the box. And the fact that there's a little more depth in the Dutch creates that separation, and it almost adds, here's the vocal, here's the bass, here's the verb, and there's these three layers, but each layer has its own space and separation, versus in the box all three are kind of sandwiched together, so then the bass and the vocal tends to mask more verb tails. That is my interpretation of it. That's how I hear it. Okay? Which kind of blew me away when I started experimenting with this with Dutch and hearing the back and forth that we were doing. I'm like, now I can take a mix I was doing in the box, like I'm doing here, just run it through an in and out of the Dutch, and automatically the mix does like this without having to do much more effort. Let's take this a step up. I'm going to introduce this unit. Flip over. So I'm going to add Silver Bullet. This has API, Neve. Then I can take the API, run it through the Neve, or I can take the Neve and run it through the API. And then each has, just like in the first plugin, the Kelvin plugin, each one has a drive and has an output per circuit. So I can drive it and then gain stage it down, drive it, gain stage it down. But that also means I can run it through the API, push it, and drive it harder into the Neve and get more saturation out of the Neve. So it's a whole bunch of possibilities. For today, I'm just going to run it through the API. And I have it on minimal drive and outputs all the way. So it's going to be subtle, but this is basically how I set it for mastering, where I'm not trying to add so much color on a mix that was already done. All I'm trying to do is do a little tonal enhancing. And when I hit this button, you guys can't see the color, can you? Hold on. How's that?
Better.
And if I leave it here, that's a work?
Yep, still works.
Okay, cool. Let me do a quick test.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening.
All right. So now we're staying on the Dutch. And then I'm just going to add the silver bullet. So we're off and we're on the Dutch, and I'm going to add silver bullet. We're starting without it.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Let me add the drums back in. So you can just appreciate it just with the instrument, melodic instruments, and the verb. Now let's hear what it does with drums.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Okay, how much of that were you guys hearing?
It's a lot more subtle, but definitely heard a bit more. I don't know what word to use. This word sounds like a bad word, but I really like this. I like the sound of it, but like it's that like the crackliness to the vocals in the mid range, high mids, but then also it added some more punchiness. It's easiest for me to hear in the kick again.
Everything sounds pleasing. Is besides the color, is there anything else that's happening with the stereo image, with the depth?
I'm gonna be honest. I wasn't listening very much for the stereo image. I didn't hear much as far as depth goes either. I wasn't listening as much for that.
Okay, we'll do that on this next round. Here's one of the things that happen. Because now I have on a circuit, an op amp on the left channel, an op amp on the right channel, no two components are exactly the same. And because they're not exactly the same, it's going to create a little bit of shift in the image left and right, because each one's going to add ever so slightly different harmonic signature. So what tends to happen is you might hear the image widen, or you might hear just a little more separation left and right. So now everything that was on the side channel, not the middle channel, moves forward and becomes a little more detailed. Because now, instead of in the box where everything is precisely exactly the same left and right, and when you do a plug-in and everything is precisely the same left and right, now it isn't. And as weird as it sounds, like, well, you know, it's not precise, is it correct? It doesn't matter if it's correct or not. It matters is, does it sound better? And those imperfections are a key to understanding why analog works, and why, to people like me, we feel that analog mixing and using these type of tools is beneficial to our results. So just listen to the left and the right extremes, not the guitar. Just kind of close your eyes and visualize where the wall is that the left and the right start and stop. And listen for that reverb tail also, and see and try to picture, and if you hear it move farther out. Here we go. Starting without the silver bullet.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Did that help?
The only thing I can really hear the difference, like spatially, is the snare and the vocals. And I did actually hear the difference in the reverb the last time that we listened to it, in the reverb tail.
Let me get the guitars out of the way.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest.
I go back to
neath the black
the box.
hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest, neath the black hole graveyard, riddled.
Did that help?
I heard a little more tail on the reverb.
Good. You were gonna say something, Madison?
Yeah, I can hear it on the bass now.
And again, this is getting layers of layers upon layers of more subtlety. But again, if we go back to where we started, where no saturation on the bass or on the drums, and we're not going through any analog equipment.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow, dying in the evening sun. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun.
You're opening up a whole bunch of avenues for you to be able to push your mix to a different level, enhance the mix in so many other ways. Okay. Questions on saturation, approach? Do you guys want to hear more analog stuff?
I'm down to hear some more analog stuff.
Okay. Nick, everything's kind of fitting in.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that as I worked this class through this whole semester, you guys find it easier to perceive these differences than you probably could have at the beginning of the semester? Yeah. Okay. Good. Goal achieved. Good. And again, it's a process, and I'm trying to cram a whole bunch of information down you guys' throat and into your brain of things that it took me, to be completely honest, several years, because some of these things I had to figure out myself. I was trying to again understand why different engineers were doing these things in the studio, and the more I got into it, the more I started to just piece it in my mind. Okay, so now I'm gonna take the silver bullet out, and instead of running the mix through the Dutch, which is quote unquote my transparent signal chain, I'm going to run it through the Neve satellite on the red circuit. So that's going to be this channel up here. I have it set up so these 8 channels go to the red light, and the bottom 8 channels go to the blue silk. Okay? And that's all happening in the box. So I'm going to go here. Channel 3 and 4 are again the red silk, and then I'll go to, do I have anything on 9 and 10 inserted? I don't. Okay. Then 9 and 10, actually, let me send it to 11 and 12, because I do have an additional signal path there that I can tap into. Okay. 3 and 4 is red or third order harmonics. 11 and 12 is blue or second order harmonics. And then I'll go to the Dutch, I'll go to the Dutch, so you just hear quote unquote transparent. Let's start with the Dutch.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head.
Okay. What did you guys hear? And could you, for starters, hear a difference?
Barely. The 3 and 4 sounded a bit thicker ish, and then 11 and 12 sounded like a little bit more high end crispiness, I think.
Yeah, I heard more reverb when you switched to 11 and 12.
Okay, and then when I went back to the Dutch at the end, could you hear a shift going out of whatever that was? Sort of.
I'd have to hear it again.
Okay. Again, this is inching into subtleties here. I've dialed all this up so I know what to listen for and how I want it to sound. So curious with you guys hearing brighter on 11 and 12 and more verb on 11 12, and curious for you guys to define what pops out on 3 and 4 that doesn't pop out on 11 and 12. So let's start with Dutch. I'll do 3 and 4, go back to the Dutch, and then go to 11 and 12 and go back to the Dutch. And just as a comparison to the Dutch, what sticks out differently from each signal flow? Here we go.
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest.
Okay, what are the results?
I am trying my best. I think 3 and 4 felt like you bit like the low end of the kick popped out a bit more.
I thought the Dutch mix was a little brighter than 3 and 4, like on the top end.
Interesting. Good. And brighter could mean a couple of things. Circuitry is adding top end on the Dutch, although again technically that's a transparent circuitry, or the fact that the red is adding mid-range, is making the mid forward and decreasing your perception of the top end. And then you see like a mid boost, and not that it's the top end is tilted down, or could possibly be both, mid range up, very top end air gets pushed down, and then when it goes to the Dutch it becomes flat, and because I already saturated the vocal in Pro Tools to have some top end, you're hearing that back up. All those things that you start trying to understand and process what each piece of gear is doing, so then you can start locking into a signature sound to each piece of gear. Let me go Dutch to the SSL. That's another signature right there, okay?
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest neath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to.
Was that one a little easier to hear a difference?
Yeah, I also noticed a bit of the stereo widening, I think.
Nick, you agree?
Yeah, no, I noticed the same thing. Yeah.
So what I do on the SSL circuit is I calibrate the SSL circuit drive different than the red and the blue silk. I've calibrated the red and the blue silk to get just enough harmonic distortion, imitating how much I would normally want to push the API console. And there's a certain amount of drive where it's enhancing, but not, and I'm going to choose different words here. I'm enhancing it with this color, but I'm not totally coloring those instruments going through that bus. It's like a kiss of it, enough that there's a signature, enough that's doing what I wanted to do without saying, oh my God, that is such an Eve sound type of thing. On the SSL, the drive is at 50%. And then I'm lowering the output to match the output. But I definitely want to hear an SSL. Nothing subtle on it. So, and that's part of why you're hearing that more of a difference. Not that, oh, SSL is more of a saturation than a Neve is more saturation. No. It's how much I'm driving each signal path. Because SSL, I really like SSL again on guitars and other things that I want some different top end to. So when I throw it there, it's because, yes, I want to drench it in that sound. Okay? And then everything else can be as subtle as I need. Now, one more layer of complexity. And then we'll stop here. Channels 11 and 12 have an insert button. That is going to this unit. These are 3 different saturation circuits, and I am currently running it through 2 of them with this much. This is 0 to 100, if you want to call it that way, or 0 to 10. So I'm running it through both of these in series, and then goes back to 11 and 12. And each of these has their own signature. And what I tend to do is, just like you heard me run the bass on the Decapitator, these tend to be more on the saturation side, so I'm trying to heavily color something when I run it through 11 and 12, and I have the insert in. Okay? So let me see how much you guys hear when I just insert these on and off. Okay?
From all of those years, it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest
that a little hard to tell the difference, or do you guys hear some sort of shift happening?
I can't hear anything. I'm sorry.
All right, that's fine. So again, as part of what I do here, like you guys can see, I have layer upon layer upon layer of choices of color that I can add. Whether subtle or not, I guess to me it makes a difference, and to the overall sound, I'm looking for those differences. But just like you saw those 2 rows of there, I have another set right next to it from a different company that has other saturation cards, circuits. So I have multiple ways where I'm introducing saturation. So going back to what I was explaining at the beginning, I get my rough mix, I get my balance, I get my panning, I get everything done where I need to, and I'm in the box at that point. I'm running through every track, figuring out what I need to fix. If there's some subtractive EQing, filtering I need to do, if there's other things that just feel like it lacks, I'll take care of those things. Then I might go as through that same process. If I'm hearing some particular instrument that is lackluster and I'm having difficulty finding where to sit it in the mix without making it too loud, I might address that particular instrument with a plugin, or I might run it through my 500 series rack that I have over here. This unit up here, I might run it through some of this on an individual track to add color, EQ, or whatever else I feel like I need to add through it, and then get it to sit where I need it to sit. Now that I got this established, then I'll go to the drum bus, and I'm like, let me run the drum bus through the red silk. How's that sitting? Let me run it through the blue bus. Let me see how that's sitting. Let me run it through the SSL, and then make a decision. Now that I think that works, let me get to the bass. Let me get to the guitars. Let me get to the vocal bus. And I'm just sending it to different outputs. So I'm taking advantage of the different color and saturations that I'm wanting to hear, and aiding that into locking and bringing the track to life before I start adding EQs and adding all these other things, and even before I start adding compression, because I'm just trying to invigorate the track as is. Then I make that decision of, well, I like where that saturation did on the bass, but now it's making the 300 hertz range just a little too push forward, a little too much saturation. Let me put out EQ and pull that down, and let everything else that the saturation did to the bass that I like, but that is a little too much. So now I'm adding some other EQing, editing here, there, and building the mix that way. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Okay. So keep that in the back of your mind. Figure out if you do want to incorporate something like this on your template, then you can incorporate that on an individual track, or if it's on a whole group. And just like on the multi-bus compression lecture, I'm saying there's an A, B, and a C bus, and the compressors are doing things to it. You can also strap along to it. The A bus has this saturation, B bus has that saturation, C bus has that saturation. So again, it's multiple layers of how you can pick and choose how to affect your sound. And now you're getting into advanced mixing at that level, when you're capable to hear it and then perceiving it and anticipating all these things. Cool? Okay, so for next class, well, let me stop the recording.